thank you for listening to the Drums and Rums podcast. If you'd like to help support the podcast and our content on YouTube, become a Drums and Rums Patreon member, and please subscribe to the YouTube channel as we work to get towards 1,000 subscribers. Links are listed in the description of this episode. And thanks again for checking out this episode and all of our other past episodes. Hey all, it's Paul from Drums and Rums, the Backbeats Meets the Spirits, and why, if you're listening to this for first drop of this episode on August 16th, why is it on a Wednesday and not on a Tuesday like I normally drop episodes? Well, there's a reason why, and again, if you're a fan of rum, which I know half of our folks that follow us are, it is National Rum Day. So, decided to shift the podcast over a day. Not a big deal, right? You're listening. Again, I'm still kind of doing our summer little R&R trip here, so wanted to go ahead and pop in because half this show is circling around rum. So, since it's National Rum Day, and I thought it didn't make sense to do a drum episode, obviously, let's talk rum. Stats, who and what is grog, and Florida rum history. So most know that rum is most commonly used as a mixer for cocktails, but there is increasing attention on premium rums suitable for straight sipping. And most rums are produced in the Caribbean as well as North and South America. But as we know, and you've listened to many of our guests and many of the rum podcast episodes, you learn that rum can be made anywhere. Of course, a lot of the ingredients do come from areas that are closer to the equator, but really you can distill and make that rum anywhere as long as it's sourced, obviously, for the sugarcane, molasses, or, obviously rum agricoles. So anyway, yes, rum can be made anywhere in the earth. It's just that some of it may be sourced particularly from one region, obviously, in the world that can grow sugarcane. So why do we say all that? Well, according to Statista.com, retail sales of rum in the U.S. reached about $8 billion in 2020. The most revenue in that year was generated for suppliers of premium rum, the second lowest price tier. The value of rum imports in the U.S. have been steadily increasing year after year. In 2020, the value of rum imports increased by 5.5% to $145 million. 3 out of the 4 top countries of origin for U.S. rum imports, where do you think? We're in the Caribbean, with the leader, the Dominican Republic, accounting for almost double the value of the next most significant trade partner. Bacardi, a family-owned company headquartered in Bermuda, produces rum in the same name, which holds the largest share of the U.S. rum market. Of course, you probably see more Bacardi anywhere else, heavily marketing, big company. Most of the places serve them. That is at least a minimum of what you'll probably see in a lot of bars that serve is Bacardi, right? So everyone knows Bacardi's name. The total sales volume of rum in the U.S. increased to 25 million 9-liter cases in 2020, representing an increase of 4% over the previous year. Per capita consumption, meanwhile, dipped slightly to just under a half liter in the same year. Rum has spiked in consumption during the summer months when consumers are drinking poolside cocktails, but December is the month with the overall highest consumption. So who would have thought, right? Like they said, you'd be probably drinking more cocktails on the cruise ships, at the pool, or at the resorts, etc. Nice pina coladas or rum runners or whatever the case may be, but did not know that rum was higher in December here. So they said it's if you're fairly new to rum, and it's okay. Again, this is what we hope to do is try to shed some light and information about rum in general. If you're interested in learning more. But yeah, rum is really growing, so definitely don't feel that you're fear of missing out, as a lot of premium rums are starting to come more to the forefront, which is great. A lot of craft rums are coming to the forefront, which is great also, especially since they are smaller, more family operated, and obviously they can make some different products, and of course small batch, but it's really great to see that rum is growing. So again, that was kind of just a little bit of some stats to kind of put some things into perspective, obviously for National Rum Day. And then obviously what's next? As I mentioned, who or what is grog? Now, before we get into who or what is grog, first we need to talk about the daily rum ration, okay? So again, the rum ration also called the tot, was a daily amount of rum given to sailors on Royal Navy ships. It was abolished in 1970 after concerns that the intake of strong alcohol would lead to unsteady hands when working machinery. So again, you may have seen some folks post online or social media and talk about the Black Tot Day, and that was July 31st, which coincidentally leads into National Rum Month. But July 31st, 1970 was the day that the Royal Navy stopped offering their daily tot to the sailors. So, of course, that was a big deal. This goes back to this rum ration or tot went from 1850 to 1970. And it consisted of 1/8 of an imperial pint, approximately 71 milliliters of rum at 95.5 proof, given out at midday. Now, senior ratings or petty officers and above received their rum neat, while junior ratings, it was diluted with 2 parts of water to make 3/8 of an imperial pint of grog, right? So this is what they started to cut the rum down with water and other things. So rum, due to its highly flammable nature, was stored in large barrels in a special rum store in the bowels of the ship. The rum ration was served from one particular barrel known as the rum tub. So that sounds like a pretty cool hot tub version, I guess. Maybe a hot tub full of rum. I don't know if I'd drink it, though. Not all sailors necessarily drew their rum. Each had the option to be marked in the ship's books as G for grog and T for temperance. Sailors who opted for the T were then given 3 pence a day instead of the rum ration, although most preferred the rum, and sailors who under 20 were not permitted a rum ration, and they were marked in their books as UA, underage. So, of course, so at least they had some guidance and adherence to underage drinking, and you don't want to have children that are underage and may not have the ability to consume alcohol as yet as they mature and grow up and so forth. But anyway, so the time when the rum ration was distributed was called up spirits, which was between 11 a.m. and 12 noon. A common cry for the sailors was "Stand fast, the Holy Ghost." This was in response to the bosun's call up spirits. Each mess had a rum bosom, which would collect the rum in a metal container called a fanny from the supply rating, responsible for measuring out the right number of tots for each mess. Tot glasses were kept separate from any other glasses. They were washed on the outside, but never on the inside, in the belief that residue of past tots would stick to the side of the glasses and make the tot even stronger. So if you ever have a glass and you drink something neat, let's say you have a aged rum and you may leave a little bit left in the glass, leave it overnight because that'll evaporate, but it will still keep a lot of that fragrance and a lot of that wood smell or aging smell in the glass. And it's kind of really interesting that it still retains that flavor. So, okay, I guess that saves away from cleaning any extra glasses, right? So the history. Prior to 1655, a sailor's ration of alcohol was originally beer with a daily ration of 1 gallon, or approximately 8 pints. This official allowance continued until after the Napoleonic Wars, when beer was not available, as it would often spoil easily. It could be substituted for a pint of wine or a half pint of spirits, depending on what locally available. In 1655, the difficulty in storing the large quantities of liquid required led to beer's complete replacement with spirits. With political influence on the Western Indian planters giving rum preference over other spirits, the half pint of spirits was originally issued neat. It is said that sailors would prove its strength by checking that with gunpowder doused with rum it would still burn, thus verifying that the rum was at least 57% ABV. The practice of compulsory diluting rum in the proportion of half a pint to 1 quart of water was first introduced in 1740 by Admiral Edward Vernon, known as Old Grog, because of his habitual groggen cloak. The ration was also split into 2 servings, one between 10 a.m. and noon, and the other between 4 and 6 p.m. In 1795, regulations required adding small quantities of lemon or lime juice to the ration to prevent scurvy. Arrgh. The rum itself also procured from distillers in Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, and the British Virgin Islands. Rations were cut in half in 1823 and again in half to the traditional amount, 1/8 of an imperial pint, or 71 milliliters, in 1850. The abolition of rum ration had been discussed in the Parliament in 1850 and again in 1881. However, nothing came of it. In 1970, Admiral Peter Hill Norton abolished a rum ration as he felt it could have led to sailors to failing a breathalyzer test and being less capable to manage complex machinery. This decision to end the rum ration was made after the Secretary of State for Defense had taken opinion from several ranks of the Navy. Ratings were instead allowed to purchase beer, and the amount allowed was determined by the amount of space available for stowing the extra beer in ships. The last rum ration was on July 31st, 1970, and began known as Black Tot Day, as sailors were unhappy about the loss of rum ration. There were reports that the day involved sailors throwing tots into the sea and staging a mock funeral in a training camp. In place of the rum ration, sailors were allowed to buy 3 1/2 imperial pint cans of beer a day and improve recreational facilities, while the rum ration was abolished in order to splice the main brace, awarding sailors of an extra tot of rum for good service, remained as a command which could only be given by the monarch and is still used to recognize good service. Rum rations are also given on special occasions. In most recent years, examples of the 100th anniversary of the Royal Canadian Navy in 2010 and after the Queen's Diamond Jubilee celebrations in 2012. In the U.S., the daily ration was 1/2 U.S. pint, or 240 milliliters, of distilled spirits until 1842, when it was reduced to 1 gill, or 120 milliliters. It was abolished in 1862. While the Royal Australian Navy never issued the rum ration, their sailors were entitled to the rum ration when they were on Royal Navy ships until 1921. The Royal Canadian Navy abolished the rum ration in 1972, and the last Navy to issue the rum ration regularly was the Royal New Zealand Navy, and they abolished the practice in 1990, February 28th. So, now you know a little bit of the history of that daily tot. Now the grog, or who or what is that? So again, you may have seen it on the cocktail menu, the grog. But how did it get its name? As I already mentioned a little bit there about the Admiral, the grog was an Admiral before it was a drink. Today's grog is a time-honored name of the stimulating rum and water mixture ration once each day to the sailors of every ship and station in the British Navy. But in 1740, it was the nickname of the eccentric and gregarious Edward Vernon, Admiral, Royal Navy, known caustically to his men as Old Grog. Old Grog got this uncomplimentary name from the peculiar boat cloak made of coarse material called grogan, which he wore while walking the decks of his flagship, and on this hangs a tale. In the late 1730s, after a distinguished career in the Navy, Admiral Vernon entered politics and as member of the British Parliament demanded more energetic military measures against Spain. Repeatedly assailing the government for its failure to face Spain's challenge to the New World, he finally declared in a blaze of enthusiasm that he could capture Puerto Bello, the mighty Spanish stronghold in Panama, with a squadron of only 6 ships. The government promptly called his bluff, gave him the 6 ships, and sent him off to live up to his word. Old Grog surprised everybody, including the Spaniards. Portobello was caught unprepared for the attack and surrendered on the second day of fighting. When the news reached London, Vernon was the hero of the day and remained so for years to come. But to the sailors of his small squadron, Old Grog was either a hero or a blue-nosed cheat, depending upon whether a man liked his rum neat or diluted with water. For it was Old Grog, after the capture of Portobello, who introduced watered rum to men who used a pint a day of straight spirits. The wily admiral never dreamed he was starting a tradition, as he violently opposed strong drink in any form and cursed its ill effects on the morals of his men. He would have preferred to cut it entirely off, but condescended to try the weaker mixture, hoping it would serve as a preemptive against the fevers that had decimated many previous expeditions to the Caribbean. The doughty sailors of his flagship didn't quite see it the same way. Flushed with victory and mellowed by the rum, they raised their cups in a toast to old grog, and the old odd name stuck to the new drink as well. Grog soon caught on throughout the Royal Navy, and before long the provision of it became not only a tradition but a statute of law. The amount of rum ration and the ratio of rum to water in the mixture had been steadily reduced over the years. Today, all men over the age of 20 are entitled to a daily tot, or 1/8 of the imperial pint of rum. Petty officers are allowed to take theirs neat, but others' ratings received as a grog, mixed with 2 parts of water and 1 of rum. In either case, it may not be saved up for a binge, but must be consumed on the spot. Those who do not wish to take it may receive a paid compensation of 3 pence per day. And incidentally, it is punishable offense to sell or give one's ration to another man. The traditional daily ceremony for the issue of the grog begins with the sounding of up spirits on the boatswain's pipe at 6 bells in the forenoon. On this signal, the officer of the day, the master-at-arms, the supply petty officer, and the butcher assemble in the door of the spirit room. The master-at-arms unlocks the 2 heavy padlocks, and party flies into the dimly room among the casks, stowed, bung up, and bilged free. The butcher taps a barrel, inserts a siphon pump into the bunghole, and carefully draws off the day's total ration for the ship's company. Neat tots for the petty officers are then issued, and the remainder are transferred to a small cask called a breaker. The breaker is then padlocked and carried from spirit room to the prominent location of the big oaken rum tub, with its shining hoops of brass and its inscription, "The Queen, God bless her." Here the breaker is left in the care of a sentry. 5 minutes before hands to dinner is piped at noon. The rum call is sounded on the bugle, and each mess sends its messman to the rum tub with a jug or fanny to draw the ration for its mess. Again, under the watchful eye of the officer of the day, a rigid ceremony is performed. The requisite volume of water is carefully measured out, and after have been tasted by the petty officer of the day to ensure it is not salt, is poured into the rum tub. The breaker is then unlocked, and the rum is emptied gently into the tub. With a dignity befitting his position, the supply petty officer takes his stand at the rum tub, opposite the master of arms and the petty officer of the day. Briskly, each messman steps forward in turn and announces his mess number. The petty officer of the day, carefully consulting his ledger, calls out the number of tots to which represented mess is entitled. The supply petty officer, bare to the elbow, fills the appropriate measure with grog and pours it into the mess fanny. One by one, the messmen get their issues and return to their messes, where they serve it out to those entitled to it. When all messes have been served, any residue in the rum tub is poured down the sculpers while the officer of the day dolefully looks on. Officers who have their own wine messes are not entitled to the ration, except on special occasions when splice the main brace is ordered. This salty expression comes down from the days of sailing ships when the tough and often dangerous job of splicing a new main yard brace, the heaviest rigging in the ship, merited the reward of a special issue of spirits. Today, splice the main brace is usually signaled only on the direct order of the reigning monarch, while visiting a Navy ship or station, or to celebrate a great victory as was done at the end of World War II. So, it's a little history there of the daily tot, the old grog, Royal Navy, shipping, and so you can understand why there's such a history around rum, pirates, Navy, and water, and all these things, because it had was all around each other. They all intertwine each other throughout history and so forth. So very fascinating on how that all came about. But what we have next is the story of a little bit of Florida history here, the true stories about real McCoy. Now, this is, to give credit here, this was an article that was written by Denny Bowden, Denny Bowden, and part of Volusia History, Retracing Florida's Past. Now, this is written by Denny, as I'm just reiterating his story here about the real McCoy. So, Florida has such a history in the rum world, not just because we're close to the Caribbean, but obviously from a supply of sugarcane here in Florida, a lot of plantation and sugar fields up in Central Florida too. Bill McCoy, which we'll talk about in this story here, history of him, and there's rum running stories. Obviously, there's rum brand named after him. So lots of history here. Obviously, the pirates and the Navy have a lot of fighting. So a lot of history when it comes to Florida here. But I was really fascinated by some of the Florida history that's a little bit more up in the central to north part of the state here. So here we go. This is a story by Denny Bowden. That's it. So here it goes. 52 years ago, my friend Bob asked me and another young teen to camp out for a single night on the empty split of land that juts into the Halifax River in our hometown of Holly Hill, just north of 11th Street, now called LPGA Boulevard. We three guys squeezed into a small tent without knowing that 61 years early, only 100 yards or so from where we had pitched our tent, was the home of one of Holly Hill's most famous men, one of America's most successful rum runners during the Prohibition. Bill McCoy of Holly Hill built his reputation by providing only the best quality booze, and as local historian Bob McKenna has pointed out, McCoy refused to dilute it as other rum runners did with water and mixed in iodine to fool buyers to think because it tasted bad, it must be good. Instead, both McCoy's undiluted whiskey and McCoy's himself came to be known as the real McCoy. Yet Bill McCoy was a teetotaler, which I learned from the local historian Beth Midland in 2007 at her Halifax Historical Museum lecture, which informed us that McCoy stood 6 feet 2 inches tall and had a voice like a foghorn. When he moved to the sleepy hamlet of Holly Hill in 1900 and set up a shipbuilding business with his brother Ben in the deep basin boat slip along the Halifax River, building first the Yankee Doodle and the Columbia in 1902, and in 1903, the Uncle Sam, an excursion boat. Sometime later, they built luxury craft for Cornelius Vanderbilt III and also Andrew Carnegie. Some people call it Carnegie. The Halifax Historical Museum in Daytona Beach was a permanent display about Bill McCoy, his rum running, and his ships. In addition to their excursion business on the Tomoka River, the McCoy brothers transported freight and passengers between Daytona, St. Augustine, and Palm Beach until the roads and buses proved too competitive for them. And according to Sally Ling, in the 1920s, the brothers turned to smuggling booze using their newly purchased white oak 90-foot fishing schooner, the Henry L. Marshall. Beth Midland said that during his career, McCoy transported 175,000 cases of scotch and rum. McCoy bought another boat, the Arethusa, which local historian Bob McKenna called the pride of the Gloucester fleet, in his lecture on McCoy at the Halifax Historical Museum in 2007. Sally Ling wrote that McCoy registered the ship with a British registry because the American Coast Guard couldn't board a foreign ship if it was outside the 3-mile limit of the U.S. territorial waters. He renamed it Tomoka, but to hide its identity, he registered the same boat with the French as the Marie Celeste. Authorities trying to overtake McCoy could only get close enough to photograph his boat, but according to McKenna, at least once McCoy slipped away from the Coast Guard into the backwaters after they had spotted his boat as the Tomoka, and he quickly removed the Tomoka nameplate and screwed on the name Marie Celeste. McKenna noted that McCoy would keep the Tomoka safely 3 miles offshore outside of the U.S. territorial waters, where he could have high-speed contact boats powered by used World War II airplane engines rendezvous with him to take his shipment ashore in boats that could outrun the Coast Guard. McCoy was so successful that the U.S. changed maritime law, making territorial waters extend to 12 miles from shore. But McKenna says that McCoy even used a seaplane to offload his smuggled rum. McCoy made a trip per month, and McKenna said that each trip cleared $100,000. But a Time magazine webpage cites Edward Bear's book, Prohibition, as saying that McCoy made $300,000 in profit for each trip. According to Wikipedia, rum running became such a problem that 20 U.S. destroyers were transferred for use by the Coast Guard. At one time, McKenna said McCoy had 5 schooners and 2 other boats. And Midland said that McCoy developed a safer transport system with the bottles of rum stacked, not in cases, but as a pyramid of 6 bottles sewn into a burlap called hams because of their appearance. To continue his rum running, McCoy moved to Nassau, where Midland says proceeds from the numerous smugglers buying the island's booze allowed Nassau to pay off debt owed to England. McCoy had a Newfoundland dog named Old Faithful that he left one evening to guard money in the ship's cabin when he went ashore. And the next morning, Midland says, McCoy found his dog outside the hotel door. It had jumped ship, swum ashore, and found his master. The dog also demonstrated its intelligence after it saved a boy who had fallen from a dock, but the dog apparently enjoyed the praise as hero so much it began seizing other opportunities to push boys into water to save them, too, so it could win new praise. Local connections with the McCoy brothers at Holly Hill include their purchase of the Sweetheart, a boat belonging to Commodore Charles Grover Burgoyne, Daytona philanthropist and benefactor. The McCoys used the boat as a passenger service to Okeechobee, according to Beth Midland. Another story uncovered by Midland is that Ben McCoy built a house for his wife in Daytona Beach on Earl Street, but he later divorced her to protect her from being killed in connection with his illegal rum running, and wiped out all the record of their marriage. Midland also found that Bill McCoy married Betty Maud Clark, a woman 22 years younger, but after several years, Betty returned to her parents. I was a year old when McCoy, 71, died on December 30th, 1948, of a heart attack and complications of poisoning aboard his Blue Lagoon in Stuart, Florida. As Sally Ling has written, Bob McKenna adds that McCoy's ashes were scattered by a St. Lucie buoy near Stuart, but several members of McCoy's family remain not far from Holly Hill. Bill's bootlegger brother Ben, who lived to be 86, is buried in Pinewood Cemetery, approximately across the street from Daytona Beach Boot Hill Saloon, and both of their parents are buried there as well. Their sister Violet, though, died in Iowa in 2005. Beth Midland helped to summarize the real McCoy's influence on this area by recounting that McCoy's mother died here, and after the house in the southwest corner of today's LPGA Boulevard and Riverside Drive was sold, some of the proceeds were used for the belfry and stained glass windows of the Daytona Community Church. Later, a local woman who knew Bill's reputation said that every time the church bells would ring, she would say, "There goes a pint and a quart." So, this is a little article, like I said, written by Denny Bowden. I keep saying it wrong. Again, history of Florida here. Again, those of you may not know, Bill McCoy have heard of the story. And it's just ironic that here you've got Bill McCoy had built boats, fast boats, and obviously this was prior to a lot of what grew from NASCAR was a lot of the bootlegging in the Carolinas and those areas with race cars would turn into NASCARs and a lot of those drivers. So this was predated NASCAR bootlegging. A lot of those times there, obviously, during some of this. So very fascinating history and how some of these things are just right there and we just don't know it or some of the history unless you're originally from there. But this is stuff that goes way back. The Daytona area, if you get a chance, definitely just shout out there to our good friends up at Copper Bottom in Holly Hill. They're right there in Holly Hill, Copper Bottom Craft Distillery there, making rum and they're right there on a lot of the areas that we were just talking about, where Bill McCoy was rum running, and the Daytona area, Volusia County, Central Florida area. Again, like I said, there's a lot of history there in some of the parks that are up there now, where a lot of the old distilleries, where obviously the plantation and a lot of the sugar fields. Yeah, there's no sugarcane really growing in Central Florida, but at one time there obviously was. So just a lot of great fascinating about Florida. Big shout out to Florida rum makers, producers, distillers, so forth. Again, support if you're here in Florida. Support some of those distilleries, that we've had on our podcast over the last 3 years. Everybody ranging from, as I mentioned, Copper Bottom to Wicked Dolphin over in the west coast of Florida to our folks here in West Palm Beach, or Revenge Rum, that we just learned about them recently here. They're based in West Palm, up in the Panhandle. So again, a lot of great rum. Support Florida rum. There's a lot of great history then. It's not got the history length of like in the Caribbean, but there is a lot of history in the Florida based on some of the stuff. And so these are just a couple little tidbits there, stories I thought was kind of interesting to share on National Rum Day, August 16th every year. So hopefully, you're listening to this and then going to enjoy a nice rum cocktail, maybe as a mojito, pina colada, old-fashioned, rum version, whatever it may be. Make sure, you enjoy it safely and so forth. And again, I appreciate everyone listening to this podcast episode. If you're listening to this, make sure that you check that we're going to be dropping no video for this podcast episode on YouTube that's going to complement the audio version of this podcast. But what I'm going to be doing is dropping a bingeable of our distillery tours that we've done over the last few years that I have not released or have put out anywhere else. So a lot of the distillery tours that I've traveled to, I'm going to drop those out there for you to check out, learn more about some of these distilleries. So definitely check it out on our YouTube channel. Go to Drums and Rubs YouTube channel. Watch the videos on Friday. We will drop Friday, August 18th. So definitely check that out, and we'll be able to watch if you're interested in checking out distillery tours. Definitely, again, thank you for listening to this podcast episode. Check all the older episodes as well, too. Hope you have a great rum day, National Rum Day, enjoying some cocktails. And I'll talk to you soon. Again, this is Paul. This is where the backbeats meet spirits. Cheers, y'all.